The air in the courtroom is thick, recycled, smelling faintly of old paper and cheap coffee. It's a sterile, beige room, designed to strip away all emotion, but mine is a tidal wave threatening to breach the walls. It's clinging to the back of my throat, a metallic taste of fear. Across the room, my husband, Mark, smirks. It's a small, tight, confident little twist of his lips. He catches my eye and gives a subtle shake of his head, a gesture that says, "See? I told you. You don't belong here." His lawyer, a man with a face like a clenched fist, whispers something in his ear, and Mark's smirk widens. They look at me like I'm a curiosity, a child who has wandered into the deep end of the pool. My hands are trembling under the heavy oak table. The judge, a woman with tired eyes and a formidable posture, peers down at me over her glasses. "Miss Davies," she says, her voice echoing slightly in the tense silence. "Are you ready to present your opening statement?" My heart hammers against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat. Every cell in my body is screaming at me to run, to fold, to prove Mark right. His voice from last week rings in my ears, slick with condescending pity. "Anna, you can't do this. You're too emotional. You'll fall apart in front of the judge. Let the professionals handle it. Take the deal, the deal." The scraps he was willing to throw me from the table of the life we built together. The word emotional lands like a punch. He always said it with that tone. The one that made it sound like a diagnosis, a flaw, a fatal weakness that made me less than. I look at him now, so calm, so certain of his victory. He thinks he knows me. He thinks he's about to watch me crumble. I take a slow, shaky breath. The trembling in my hands doesn't stop, but I place them flat on the table anyway. I can feel the grain of the wood under my palms, solid, real. I push myself to my feet. The room tilts for a second. I am my own counsel, my own champion, my own last hope, and I am about to speak. If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever had your own feelings used as a weapon against you, tell me your story in the comments. I read all of them. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. Your support helps more than you know. Just 2 years ago, the only tables I stood at were covered in fabric swatches and design blueprints. Our life was a carefully constructed masterpiece, or so I thought. We lived in a house with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out onto a garden I tended myself. We ran a business, Davies and Company. Interiors, that we had started in our tiny, cramped apartment with nothing but a second-hand laptop and a shared dream. I was the silent partner in the name, but the driving force in reality. I was the one who could walk into an empty space and see its soul. I could talk to a client for 10 minutes and understand the unspoken things they wanted their home to say. I sketched the designs, I sourced the materials, I managed the projects with a meticulous passion that bordered on obsession. Mark handled the numbers. He was charming, handsome, and brilliant in a boardroom. He could make a spreadsheet sing, and a potential investor feel like they were the most important person in the world. We were a perfect team. He was the head. I was the heart. That's what he used to tell me, his hand on my back, his voice a warm murmur in my ear after we'd landed a big contract. "We're unstoppable, Anna," he'd say. And I believed him. I trusted him with a totality that now seems criminally naive. I trusted him with our finances, with our future, with my name. When we incorporated, he suggested putting the business primarily in his name for tax purposes. "It's just cleaner this way, babe," he'd said. "We're a team. It doesn't matter whose name is on the paper," and I agreed. Why wouldn't I? We were building a life, not a legal case against each other. My trust was a warm, comfortable blanket. I let him take the lead in meetings, even when the core ideas were mine. I'd watch him present my concepts, my sketches, and feel a swell of pride. We were doing it. We. That word was the foundation of my world. Our evenings were quiet, comfortable. We'd sit on the couch we'd designed together, drinking wine, talking about our day. He'd complain about supply chain issues, and I'd talk about a new color palette I was excited about. It was domestic, it was peaceful, it was, I thought, love. But now I know that while I was building a home, He was building an exit strategy. I see the signs now, of course. Hindsight is a cruel editor. The late nights at the office, he insisted, he had to handle alone. The new credit card, he said, was for business expenses only, the way he started talking about my successes in interviews instead of our successes. The slight, almost imperceptible distance that had grown between us, a chill in the air I had dismissed as the stress of a growing business. I had explained it all away because the alternative was unthinkable. The alternative was that the man I had given my life to was a stranger. The alternative was that our entire life was a lie. And who wants to believe that? It's easier to believe you're just tired or stressed or maybe even a little bit emotional. The lie shattered on a Tuesday. It was late, almost midnight, and I was in our home office, trying to reconcile an invoice that made no sense. Mark was supposedly at a dinner with a potential client. I was tired, my eyes gritty from staring at the screen, but something about the numbers was nagging at me. A vendor I'd never heard of. A payment amount that seemed astronomical for consulting fees. I decided to search for the company name in our shared email server. And that's when I saw it. An email from Mark to his personal account, sent an hour earlier. The subject line was just one word. Finalized. My blood went cold. I clicked on it. It wasn't a business document.
It was a real estate contract.
A lease agreement for a downtown loft apartment. In his name. And Clara's. Clara, our lead designer. The protégé I had hired myself, mentored, championed. The woman I had invited into our home for dinner parties. The woman whose talent I admired. My breath caught in my chest. I scrolled down, my hand shaking so badly I could barely control the mouse. Attached were bank statements. Statements from an account I had never seen before. An account with a balance that made me feel sick. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. Our money. Money siphoned from Davies and Company, transaction by transaction, disguised as payments to shell corporations, like the consulting firm on the invoice I was holding. It was all there. A meticulous, calculated betrayal documented in cold, hard numbers. I felt the floor drop out from under me. The room spun. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a plan. A long, carefully executed plan to erase me from my own life. I heard the front door open downstairs. Mark's keys clattered into the ceramic bowl on the hall table. His footsteps were heavy on the stairs. He was humming. He walked into the office, loosening his tie, a smile on his face. Hey, babe, you're still up? The smile vanished when he saw my face. When he saw what was on the screen. The silence in the room was absolute. It was a living thing, suffocating me. I couldn't speak. I could only point at the monitor. He didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. His expression hardened, shifting from surprise to something cold and distant. A mask slid into place. So you found it, he said, his voice flat. Not a question. A statement. Mark. I whispered, the name a shard of glass in my throat. What is this? He leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms. The man I loved disappeared right before my eyes, replaced by this chillingly calm stranger. It's exactly what it looks like, Anna. It's over. I finally found my voice, and it was raw with disbelief. What's over? Our marriage? Our business? Everything we built. I'm filing for divorce, he said, as if he were discussing the weather. Clara and I are starting our own firm. You'll get your fair share, of course. I'll have my lawyer draw up a proposal. Your fair share, the words were so clinical, so insulting. He was talking about our life's work, our shared soul, as if it were a pie to be sliced up. And he had already decided how small my piece would be. The rage came then, hot and blinding. It burned away the shock. My fair share? You've been stealing from me. From us. This is our company, Mark. I build it with you. My designs, my clients. Oh, Anna, he sighed, that familiar, condescending tone creeping back into his voice. Don't be so dramatic. You're an artist. A talented one, I'll give you that. But I'm the one who made it a business. You have no idea how any of this actually works. You're too emotional to understand the finances. There it was again. That word. Emotional. He was using it as a shield. A way to dismiss my pain, my contribution, my entire identity within our partnership. He was telling me that my passion, the very thing that made our company successful, was a liability. He walked over to the desk, not even looking at me, and closed the laptop. The click echoed like a gunshot in the silent room. "My lawyer will be in touch with you tomorrow," he said, turning to leave. "I suggest you find one of your own. And try to be rational about this," he left.
Just like that.
He walked out of the office, down the stairs, and out of her house. Out of my life. I stood there, frozen, staring at the blank screen of the laptop. The silence he left behind was louder than any argument. It was the sound of my world collapsing. In that moment, I wasn't just heartbroken. I was at war. I just didn't know it yet. The first lawyer I hired, a man named Arthur Vance, came highly recommended. He was supposed to be a shark, a bulldog, the best divorce attorney in the city. He had a corner office with a panoramic view of the skyline and a handshake that felt like a threat. He listened to my story, his face impassive, occasionally jotting down a note on a yellow legal pad. I poured my heart out, my voice thick with a mixture of grief and fury. I told him about the late nights, the sacrifices, the designs that had won us awards, the clients who only ever wanted to deal with me. I told him about the stolen money, the secret apartment, the betrayal with Clara. When I finished, I was emotionally exhausted, my hands raw from twisting a tissue into shreds. Arthur leaned back in his leather chair, which groaned in protest. "It's a classic case, Ms. Davies," he said, his voice dry. "He said," she said. "He's got the paperwork in his name. You've got the emotion." He said the word like it was something distasteful he'd found on the sole of his shoe. "Mark's lawyer sent over a preliminary settlement offer this morning." He slid a piece of paper across the vast expanse of his mahogany desk. I picked it up. The number was so low it felt like a typo. It was barely enough to cover the taxes on the house, let alone buy me out of the business I had bled for. It was an insult. A joke. "This is nothing," I stammered. "This is less than 10% of what the business is worth. It doesn't even account for the money he stole." Arthur steepled his fingers. "Mark's position is that the money in the separate account was from his own private investments before the marriage, and the business's recent growth is solely due to his management. They're prepared to argue that your contribution was that of a salaried employee, not a partner." I felt the blood drain from my face. A salaried employee? I was never paid a salary. We reinvested everything back into the company. We lived off of shared business straws. He knows that. Knowing it and proving it are two very different things in a courtroom, Ms. Davies, he said patiently, as if explaining a complex concept to a child. He has documents, incorporation papers, tax filings, all with his name on them.
You have.
Anecdotes. A court values documents, not feelings. The next few weeks were a blur of sterile meeting rooms and confusing legal jargon. Mark's lawyer, a piranha named Jessica Albright, was relentless. She filed motion after motion, burying me in paperwork. They requested my personal diaries, my text messages, my emails to my sister, looking for anything they could twist to paint me as unstable, unreliable, too emotional. Mark had frozen our joint accounts, claiming they were business assets that needed to be protected during the dispute. My credit cards were maxed out. Arthur Vance's bills started arriving, each one a small book filled with itemized charges for every phone call, every email, every minute he spent thinking about my case. He was demanding a larger retainer to proceed to the discovery phase. "We can fight this," he told me during one tense phone call, "but it's going to be expensive. And honestly, your chances aren't great. He's got the better paper trail." Sometimes, the best strategy is to take the deal, cut your losses, and move on. How could I move on? My entire life, my identity, my future was tied up in that company. Giving it up felt like amputating a limb. Every day was a struggle to simply get out of bed. The house felt huge and empty. Every object, the couch we bought together, the painting we argued over, the rug I spent a month sourcing from Turkey, was a monument to a life that was now a lie. The silence was the worst part. It was a physical presence, pressing in on me, reminding me of my failure. I stopped sleeping. I lost weight. I felt like a ghost haunting the rooms of my own life. Meanwhile, Mark and Clara were thriving. They were disgustingly, publicly thriving. They didn't just take my husband and my business, they took my social life, too. Industry friends we'd shared suddenly stopped returning my calls. I'd see photos online of them at galas, at restaurant openings, at industry events I should have been at, always smiling, always together. He was parading her around as the new creative genius behind the firm. In one online article, he was quoted as saying, "It's refreshing to work with someone like Clara who brings such a clear, rational vision to the table, free from unnecessary sentiment." That line was a knife, and he twisted it. He wasn't just trying to divorce me, he was trying to erase me. He was rewriting our history, painting me as a hysterical, sentimental footnote in the story of his great success. The pressure was immense. Arthur called again, his tone more insistent. "Anna, you need to make a decision. The settlement offer is still on the table. If we don't accept it, we have to file our response by Friday. That means another $20,000 for my retainer to prepare for depositions, $20,000. It might as well have been $20 million. I looked at the pile of bills on my kitchen counter. The mortgage payment was late. A red final notice was stamped across the electricity bill. I was drowning. Mark knew it. He was starving me out. He was counting on me to break. And I was terrifyingly close to proving him right. One night, I hit the wall. It wasn't a dramatic crash, but a quiet, hollow collapse. I was sitting on the floor of my closet, surrounded by Mark's clothes, which I hadn't had the strength to pack up. His scent still lingered on a gray cashmere sweater. I picked it up and held it to my face, and for the first time in weeks, I cried. It wasn't the angry, frustrated crying I had been doing. This was a deep, gut-wrenching sob of pure despair. The kind that leaves you empty and breathless. I was defeated. Utterly and completely. I had no money, no allies, and a lawyer who thought my best option was surrender. Mark had won. He had outplayed me, outmaneuvered me, and was going to walk away with everything, leaving me with nothing but a broken heart and a mountain of debt. I curled up on the floor, the sweater clutched in my fist, and let the darkness wash over me. I stayed there for hours, a numb, hollowed-out shell. The settlement offer was on the nightstand by the bed. I could see it from where I lay. I just had to sign it. I could make the pain stop. I could end the fight. All I had to do was give up. And as I lay there, on the verge of total surrender, something shifted. A tiny, hard ember of anger began to glow in the pit of my stomach. It started with a memory. Me, at 3 a.m, sketching on a napkin in a 24-hour diner because an idea for a client's difficult living room space had woken me from a dead sleep. Mark had been asleep at home. Another memory. Me, on my hands and knees on a dusty construction site, arguing with a contractor about a wall that was 2 inches off, refusing to back down because I knew it would ruin the entire flow of the design. Mark had been at a networking lunch. Another. Me, holding the hand of a client whose husband had just passed away, talking her through how we could redesign her bedroom to feel like her own space again, a sanctuary for her new life. Mark had been closing the financial side of the deal. My work wasn't just anecdotes, it was the blood and bone of that company. He hadn't just handled the numbers. He had monetized my soul. And his voice echoed in my head, dripping with that infuriating, condescending calm. "You're too emotional." He said it like it was an illness. But my emotion wasn't a sickness. It was my engine. My passion for design, my empathy for our clients, my obsessive attention to detail. That was the magic. That was the reason Davies and Company wasn't just another soulless design firm. He didn't see it as a strength. He saw it as a tool he could use and then discard. He used my passion to build his empire, and now he was using it as a weapon to tear me down in court. The ember of anger flared into a bonfire. The tears stopped. A cold, terrifying clarity washed over me. I wouldn't just lose the business. I would lose myself. I would be validating his narrative forever, that I was just the emotional, flighty artist, and he was the genius who made it all work. I would be letting him erase me. I stood up, my legs shaky. I walked out of the closet and over to the nightstand. I picked up the settlement offer. I looked at the pathetic number, the insulting terms. Then I walked into the office, the same office where my world had fallen apart, and I turned on my computer. I wrote 2 emails. The first was to Arthur Vance. It was short and to the point. Your services are no longer required. Please forward my complete file to my home address immediately. The second was to Mark's lawyer, Jessica Albright. It was even shorter. I reject your client's settlement offer in its entirety. I will be representing myself pro se going forward. All future correspondence should be directed to me. I hit send on both before I could second-guess myself. My heart was pounding, a wild mix of terror and exhilaration. It was a completely insane decision. I knew nothing about the law. I was outmatched, outfunded, and completely out of my depth. But for the first time in months, I wasn't a victim cowering in a closet. I was a fighter. Mark thought my emotions were my weakness. I was about to prove they were my greatest weapon. The next morning, the panic set in. The bravado of the night before evaporated in the harsh light of day, leaving behind a cold, hard knot of fear in my stomach. What had I done? I had fired the only person who knew how to navigate this treacherous world and declared war on a man with unlimited resources and a ruthless legal team. I felt like I had jumped out of a plane without a parachute. But I couldn't go back. My pride wouldn't let me. So I did the only thing I could. I started to learn. My first stop was the county law library. It was a solemn, intimidating place, filled with towering shelves of identical-looking books and the hushed whispers of people who spoke a language I didn't understand. The air smelled of old paper and dust and quiet desperation. I felt like a complete imposter. I asked the librarian, a kind woman with a patient face, where to find information on divorce proceedings and corporate law. She pointed me to a section that looked like a solid wall of leather-bound text. For the first few days, it was gibberish. Legalese is a foreign language, designed to be confusing and impenetrable. I'd read a single paragraph 10 times and still not understand it. I bought legal pads and pens and started taking notes, defining every term I didn't know. Motion to compel. Subpoena duces tecum. Interrogatories. Spoliation of evidence. It was like learning to see in the dark. Slowly, painstakingly, my eyes began to adjust. My nights became a blur of caffeine and highlighter ink. I turned my dining room table into a war room. I pinned timelines to the walls, created flow charts of our finances, and read every book I could find on trial strategy and cross-examination. I downloaded court transcripts from famous cases and read them aloud, trying to understand the rhythm and flow of a courtroom argument. The case file from Arthur Vance arrived in 2 massive banker's boxes. I spent a week just organizing the documents, creating a color-coded system. Mark's initial financial disclosures were in there. They were a work of fiction. He claimed assets were worth pennies on the dollar and inflated business debts to imaginary creditors. His lies weren't just insulting, they were sloppy. He was so confident I wouldn't know what to look for, so certain I was just the emotional artist who didn't understand numbers. That was his first mistake. My passion for design wasn't just about colors and fabrics, it was about precision. It was about structure, balance, and seeing how all the little pieces fit together to create a whole. I started applying that same obsessive focus to our finances. I subpoenaed bank records, not just for the last 2 years, but for the entire 10-year history of the company. I requested every email from our shared business server. I filed motions, clumsy at first, often getting them sent back by the clerk for formatting errors. Each rejection was a small humiliation, but I learned. I'd correct the mistake, read the court's rules of procedure again, and refile. I was teaching myself how to be a lawyer, one painful, humbling step at a time. The work was grueling, isolating. There were days I'd stare at a spreadsheet until my vision blurred, feeling so overwhelmed I wanted to quit. But then I'd see a photo of Mark and Clara at some charity dinner, smiling for the cameras, and the anger would come roaring back, giving me a fresh wave of energy. My emotion wasn't making me fall apart, it was the fuel that kept me going. I was no longer just fighting for my share of the assets. I was fighting for the truth. I was fighting for the woman who sketched on napkins in diners and argued with contractors on dusty job sites. I was fighting for the right to not be erased. And as I delved deeper into the paper trail, a new, darker picture began to emerge. This wasn't just a man leaving his wife and stealing some money. This was far more sinister. Mark wasn't just trying to leave me with nothing. He was trying to make sure there was nothing left to leave. My first appearance in court as my own counsel was a disaster. It was a preliminary hearing on a motion I had filed to compel Mark to produce more detailed financial records. I had spent a week preparing my argument, writing it out on note cards, practicing it in front of a mirror until my voice was hoarse. But the moment I stood up to address the judge, the carefully rehearsed words evaporated from my mind. The courtroom was a theater of intimidation. Jessica Albright, Mark's lawyer, was a vision of sleek, corporate power in a charcoal gray suit. She radiated an effortless confidence that made me feel like a clumsy amateur. Mark was there, sitting beside her, looking bored. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was studiously examining his fingernails, as if the proceedings were a minor inconvenience. "Your Honor," I began, my voice a squeak. I cleared my throat and tried again. "Your Honor, I have filed this motion because the financial disclosures provided by the respondent are incomplete." Jessica Albright was on her feet before I could finish the sentence. "Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is making unsubstantiated claims. The respondent has complied fully with all discovery requests sustained," the judge said, not even looking at me. "Ms. Davies, do you have a specific legal basis for this motion? A specific document you can point to that is missing?" I fumbled with my papers, my hands shaking again. The organized files on my dining room table were a chaotic mess in front of me. "Well, yes, Your Honor. The profit and loss statements don't seem to reconcile with the tax returns, and the list of business assets is." "It seems wrong," Albright scoffed, a quiet but audible sound of contempt. "Your Honor, with all due respect to Ms. Davies' enthusiasm for her new hobby, she clearly doesn't understand the complexities of corporate accounting. We have provided everything required by law. This is a fishing expedition, and it's wasting the court's time," the judge sighed, a long, weary sound. She looked at me over her glasses, her expression a mixture of pity and impatience. "Ms. Davies, representing oneself is a difficult path. I admire your courage, but you are bound by the same rules of evidence and procedure as a licensed attorney. Vague feelings that something seems wrong are not a basis for a motion. Unless you can cite a specific, documented discrepancy, I'm inclined to agree with Ms. Albright." My face burned with humiliation. I felt 100 pairs of eyes on me. I saw Mark whisper something to Albright, and they shared a small, secret smile. They were enjoying this. They were watching the emotional woman flounder and fail, just as they'd predicted. I stammered through the rest of my argument, but my confidence was gone. The judge denied my motion. I sat down, my whole body trembling, my heart sinking into my shoes. I had made a terrible mistake. I was going to lose everything. The next few weeks were a series of similar small, painful defeats. Albright was an expert at procedural warfare. She would file motions filled with obscure legal citations, forcing me to spend days in the library just to understand what she was asking for. She'd schedule depositions for times she knew were difficult for me, then accuse me of being uncooperative. In my own deposition, she was brutal. She grilled me for 7 hours straight. She twisted my words, questioned my memory, and brought up my personal emails, reading my own emotional outpourings to my sister back to me in a flat, mocking tone. "So, on this date," she'd say, peering at a printout, "you wrote, 'I feel like I'm losing my mind.' Would you say that's an accurate reflection of your mental state, Ms. Davies?" She was building her case, brick by brick. I was unstable, irrational, and had no grasp of the business realities. Mark's narrative. The doubt began to creep back in, a poisonous weed. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was in over my head. Maybe I should have just taken the deal. The loneliness of the fight was crushing. Friends who had promised to be there for me started to drift away, uncomfortable with the messiness of it all. They'd offer platitudes. "You're so strong. I don't know how you do it, but they stopped inviting me out. I was a reminder of something they didn't want to think about, that a life could be shattered so completely, so quickly. I was living on cheap pasta and coffee, the stress a constant, grinding pressure. The house was in foreclosure. I was fighting for a multi-million-dollar company while trying to figure out how to keep the lights on. It felt utterly, hopelessly impossible. The judge had warned me. My lawyer had warned me. Mark had warned me. And I hadn't listened. I was running out of time, money, and hope. It seemed like all I had left was the very emotion they were using to destroy me. The breakthrough came at 2 o'clock in the morning, on a night when I was ready to give up for good. I was bleary-eyed, staring at a mountain of subpoenaed corporate server data, thousands of emails, attachments, and calendar entries. I was looking for the final proof of the money transfers, a smoking gun that would tie the siphoned funds directly to Mark's secret account in a way his lawyers couldn't dismiss. My eyes were burning, and the words on the screen were starting to swim together. I was about to shut the laptop and concede defeat when I noticed something odd. A series of encrypted, password-protected zip files in a folder deep within the server archives. The folder was mislabeled Q3 Marketing Projections 2018. It was an old folder, something no one would have a reason to look at. But I had requested everything. Mark and his lawyers had probably assumed I'd never find it, or that if I did, I wouldn't be able to open it. I tried the obvious passwords: his birthday, Clara's name, the company's anniversary. Nothing. I sat back, chewing on my lip. What was Mark's ultimate weakness? His ego. He was arrogant. He thought he was the smartest person in any room. What would his password be? I tried a phrase he used to say to me, back when I thought he was joking. Master of the universe, the files unzipped. My heart stopped. It wasn't financial data. It was a chain of emails. Not from Mark's company account, but from a private, anonymous email address. The recipient was someone named Richard Black, the CEO of our biggest competitor, Sterling Design Group. I started reading, and a new, more profound wave of cold washed over me. This was so much bigger than a divorce. So much uglier than infidelity and theft. The emails laid out a conspiracy in chilling detail. Mark hadn't just been planning to leave me and start a new firm with Clara. That was the cover story. His real plan was to systematically devalue Davies and company from the inside, and then sell its most valuable assets, our proprietary client list, my custom design methodologies, and our exclusive supplier contracts, to Sterling Design. The deal was set to close the week after our divorce was finalized. He was going to sell the soul of our company to our biggest rival for a 7-figure payout. Then he was going to let Davies and company collapse, leaving me with a bankrupt, worthless shell. The money he had been siphoning wasn't just for a new apartment with his mistress. It was seed money to cover his tracks and bridge the gap until his big payday from Sterling. I scrolled through the attachments. There were copies of my private design portfolios, client strategy documents that I had written, even drafts of the sale agreement with Sterling. He had been planning this for years. This wasn't just a betrayal of our marriage, it was corporate espionage. It was fraud on a scale I couldn't have imagined. He wasn't just trying to cheat me in a divorce. He was trying to burn my entire professional world to the ground, salt the earth, and dance on the ashes. The smug looks in the courtroom, the condescending offers, the constant references to my emotional state, it was all a brilliant, sociopathic performance. He needed me to be seen as an unstable artist so that when the company inevitably failed after his sabotage, everyone would blame me. The emotional wreck who couldn't run a business without her brilliant husband. I felt a terrifying calm settle over me. The grief and the heartbreak were still there, but they were now encased in ice. This was no longer a messy divorce. This was a criminal conspiracy. He thought he was playing chess, and that I was playing checkers. He had no idea I was about to flip the whole board over. He thought the fight was about marital assets and hurt feelings. He had no idea that I now held the evidence that could not only make him lose the business, but could also send him to prison. The gun he thought was pointed at my head had been in his own hand the entire time. He just hadn't realized it yet. The final day of the trial arrives. The beige courtroom no longer intimidates me. It feels like my arena. I've spent more time here in the last 6 months than I have in my own living room. I know its rhythms, its echoes, its cold, impartial gaze. I am no longer the trembling, uncertain woman who first stood at this table. I am calm, focused. I feel a strange sense of peace, the kind that comes when you have nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. Mark and Jessica Albright are at their table, whispering confidently. Mark catches my eye and gives me a look of pity. It's the last time he will ever look at me that way. The day is a blur of legal procedure. Jessica presents their case first. It's a masterful performance of fiction. She paints Mark as the stoic business genius, burdened for years by an emotionally volatile partner who contributed little more than erratic creative whims. She presents her doctored financials, her paid-for experts who testify to the company's supposed debts and my lack of business acumen. I don't object much. I let her build her narrative. I let her construct the beautiful, elaborate cage she thinks she's trapping me in. Let them think they're winning. A good designer knows the importance of a dramatic reveal. Then it's my turn. The judge looks at me, a hint of weariness in her eyes. Ms. Davies, you may call your first witness. I call Mark Davies to the stand. I say, my voice clear and steady. A ripple of surprise goes through the courtroom. Calling the opposing party as your first witness is an aggressive move. Jessica Albright objects immediately, but the judge overrules her. Mark walks to the witness stand, a flicker of annoyance on his face, but no real fear. He thinks I'm going to ask him about the affair, about the money. He thinks I'm going to get emotional. He's prepared for that. I let him get comfortable. I start with the basics. I walk him through the early days of the company, my voice even and professional. I have him confirm my role in landing our first major clients. I have him identify my handwriting on the initial business plans. I use his own pride against him, letting him talk about our early successes. He's relaxed, almost enjoying himself, painting himself as the benevolent mentor to my raw talent. Then I pivot. Mr. Davies, I'd like to direct your attention to the screen. I project the first of the bank statements from his secret account. Can you identify this account? He hesitates. It's a personal investment account, an investment account that had weekly deposits matching withdrawals from Davies and Company's operating budget, labeled as consulting fees to a shell corporation registered in the Cayman Islands. Is that correct? His face pales slightly. Jessica is on her feet. Objection. Relevance. Your Honor, I say, turning to the judge, this speaks directly to the fraudulent concealment of marital assets. I am establishing a pattern. I'll allow it. The judge says, her eyes now fixed on the screen. Proceed. I walk him through every single transfer. Methodically.
Dispassionately.
I have the bank records, the invoices, the corporate filings for the shell company. With each question, the air in the room grows colder. Mark's confident demeanor begins to crumble. He stammers, contradicts himself. I don't recall. That was for a legitimate business expense. My accountant handled that. He's lying, and everyone knows it. But this is just the appetizer. Your Honor, I say, my voice ringing with a new authority. I would now like to present evidence entered under seal last night. Evidence of corporate espionage and conspiracy to defraud. The courtroom erupts in murmurs. Jessica Albright looks stunned. Objection. This is ambushing the witness. We've had no discovery on this. It's rebuttal evidence, Your Honor. I counter smoothly, using the legal terms I had spent months learning. It directly rebuts Mr. Davies' testimony that all his actions were in the best interest of the company. The judge leans forward, her interest piqued. Show me. I project the first email between the anonymous account and Richard Black of Sterling Design. The one with the subject line, Phase 1, Devaluation. Mark stares at the screen. All the color drains from his face. He looks like he's seen a ghost. I see a flicker of pure, animal terror in his eyes. He looks at me, truly looks at me, for the first time all day. The woman he dismissed as too emotional is holding his entire life in her hands. Mr. Davies, I ask, my voice like ice. Can you explain to the court what Phase 1, devaluation refers to? He opens his mouth, but no sound comes out. He's frozen. Utterly, completely frozen. He just stares at the screen, his carefully constructed world shattering around him. Let me help you. I continue, projecting the next email, which details the plan to sabotage client projects to drive down the firm's value. Is this your plan to intentionally ruin the company you built, Mr. Davies? All so you could sell its pieces to your biggest competitor? Objection. Jessica screams, but it's too late. The damage is done. The judge is reading the emails on her monitor, her expression turning from curiosity to stone-cold fury. I don't stop. I present everything. The draft sales agreement. The intellectual property theft. The timeline. I have him dead to rights. For my final move, I call a surprise witness. A junior accountant at our firm, a quiet young man named Kevin, who I had always treated with kindness and respect. He comes forward, visibly nervous but determined. He testifies that Mark had instructed him to cook the books, and that, fearing for his job but knowing it was wrong, he had made personal copies of the original, unaltered financial records before deleting them from the server. He hands a flash drive to the bailiff. It's over. I know it is. I turn to look at Mark. He's a broken man. The smugness, the arrogance, the condescending pity, all gone. He's slumped in the witness chair, staring at me with a look of utter disbelief. He's finally seeing me, not the emotional wife, not the flighty artist. He's seeing the woman who built half of his world, the woman he underestimated, the woman who just took the other half back. The verdict comes 2 weeks later. It's not a victory, it's an annihilation. I am awarded 100% of the business. The house. The entirety of the stolen funds, plus punitive damages for the fraud. The judge, in her ruling, uses words like shocking, malicious, and a profound breach of marital and fiduciary duty. The final sentence of her judgment is a recommendation to the district attorney's office to open a criminal investigation into Mark Davies and Richard Black for conspiracy and fraud. I walk out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon sun, and for the first time in over a year, I can breathe. It's a strange, hollow feeling, triumph mixed with a deep, lingering sadness. I won. I destroyed him. But I take no joy in his destruction. I only feel the profound ache of what we lost, what he threw away. I see him one last time across the courthouse steps. He's surrounded by reporters, his face a mask of gray despair. Clara is there, her face streaked with tears, screaming at his lawyer. Their new life, their grand plan, is in ruins. He looks up, and our eyes meet across the crowd. There's no anger in his gaze.
No hatred.
Just a vast, empty bewilderment. He still doesn't understand how this happened. How the woman he wrote off could have so thoroughly and systematically dismantled him. He never saw me coming. That was his ultimate mistake. He was so focused on my emotions as a weakness, he never realized they were the source of my strength. My love for what I built made me fight. My pain from his betrayal fueled my resolve. My passion for precision allowed me to uncover his lies. In trying to use my emotions against me, he handed me the very weapon I needed to win. I turn away and start walking. I don't look back. The months that follow are about rebuilding. Not just the business, but myself. I rename the firm. It's not Davies and Company anymore. It's just my name. It's mine. The clients who had left, hearing the news of a verdict and the truth of what happened, start to come back. New clients come, drawn to the story of a woman who refused to be erased. The business is stronger than ever because now it's built on a foundation of truth, not lies. The house, once a museum of a dead marriage, slowly starts to feel like a home again. I paint the walls, I get rid of the furniture that holds bad memories. I reclaim the space, piece by piece. There are still hard days. Days when the ghost of the man I thought I married lingers in the quiet hallways. The scars of betrayal don't ever fully disappear, but they fade. They become a part of the tapestry of who I am now, a woman who has been through fire and learned she is fireproof. A woman who knows that her emotions are not a liability, but a superpower. The world may see strength as something hard and unyielding, but I know better. True strength is soft. It's the resilience to feel everything, to break, and to then, piece by piece, put yourself back together, stronger than you were before. They say the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. I think I'm finally getting there. That quiet, peaceful place beyond the storm. If this story hit close to home, if you've ever had to fight to be seen for who you truly are, I'd love to hear your version in the comments. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these stories to life.